If you own a suppressor, a short-barreled rifle, or any NFA-regulated item, stop what you're doing and pay close attention. The regulatory landscape just shifted in ways that could turn thousands of law-abiding gun owners into federal felons. And most people won't realize they've crossed the line until agents show up at their door. I'm not talking about proposed changes or future legislation. This is happening right now. The ATF has quietly updated enforcement priorities, tightened compliance requirements, and expanded their investigative techniques in ways that are catching even experienced NFA owners completely off guard. What you legally did 5 years ago, what seemed like common sense last year, what your buddy at the range told you was fine, none of that matters anymore. 7 specific compliance issues are creating a perfect storm of violations, and the 7th one affects nearly 40% of all NFA trust owners without them knowing it. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to explain could be the difference between maintaining your rights and facing federal prosecution. The margin for error has disappeared, and the penalties are severe enough to destroy your life. Let's start with the foundation, because this is where most violations are happening without people even realizing it. When you registered your NFA item, your suppressor, your SBR, whatever it is, you filed it to a specific address. That address isn't just a formality on the paperwork. It's a legal requirement that creates a binding restriction on where that item can exist. If you move that item to any other location, even temporarily, even if you own that location, you are required to file ATF Form 5320.20 and receive approval before the item can be relocated. This isn't a courtesy notification. This is a strict legal mandate with criminal penalties attached. Let me give you a real-world scenario that's catching people right now. You registered your suppressor to your home address in Texas. 6 months later, you inherit your family's hunting property in Oklahoma. You want to take some of your firearms there for the season. You cannot take that registered suppressor to that property without filing Form 5320.20 first and waiting for approval. Even though you own both locations, even though it's your property, even though you're only going for the weekend. The processing time for Form 5320.20 is currently running between 60 and 90 days, depending on the time of year. That means if you want to take your suppressor on a hunting trip next month, you needed to start the paperwork 3 months ago. And here's the part that's destroying people's lives. You cannot deviate from what you filed. If your approved form says you're traveling from November 15th to November 22nd to hunt in Eagle County, Colorado, and you leave a day early, that's a violation. You stay 2 extra days because the hunting is good, that's another violation. You drive over to the next county to visit a friend's range, that's a 3rd violation. The ATF issued updated guidance in late 2025, making this enforcement priority crystal clear. Any change in location without prior approval is a federal crime. And they're not treating these as administrative oversights anymore. These are serious prosecutions with serious consequences. We're seeing charges filed against people who were moving to new homes and took their NFA items with them, people who stored registered suppressors at family cabins they'd been using for years, people who brought their SBRs to friends' property for weekend shooting trips. The second major compliance trap involves who can possess your NFA items, and the rules have become strict to the point of absurdity. Under current ATF interpretation, allowing anyone else to handle your registered NFA item even momentarily constitutes an illegal transfer unless that person is specifically listed on your registration or trust. Your spouse cannot clean your suppressor while you're at work unless they're on the paperwork. Your adult son who lives with you cannot handle your registered SBR unless he's listed as an authorized person. Your hunting partner cannot hold your registered shotgun for 30 seconds while you adjust your gear. The key term the ATF is using now is constructive possession. If someone has the ability to exercise control over your NFA item without you being immediately present, that qualifies as possession and therefore as an illegal transfer. This has created situations that seem deliberately designed to create violations. There are documented cases of married couples where the spouse had access to the gun safe containing the registered item while the owner was away. The ATF argued that constituted illegal possession because the spouse could have accessed the NFA item without the owner present. Think about the practical implications for a moment. If you're an NFA owner and you're married, your spouse needs to be listed on the registration or trust, or they cannot be alone in the house with access to where those items are stored. If you have adult children living with you, they need to be formally listed, or they're in violation just by having the theoretical ability to access your safe. If you have anyone who might need to access your firearms in an emergency, a parent, a sibling, a close friend, they must be legally documented as authorized possessors. Over 200,000 NFA items were registered to individuals rather than trusts before this interpretation tightened. Most of those owners are now in technical violation every single day because family members have constructive possession. And here's what makes this particularly dangerous. The ATF is building cases using social media posts, range videos, and even casual conversations that neighbors overhear and report. If you've posted photos showing someone else handling your registered items, that's evidence. If you've mentioned in an online forum that your buddy tried out your new suppressor, that's a documented admission. If you've uploaded a YouTube video where your son is shooting your SBR at the family range, you've just created permanent evidence of illegal transfer. The statute of limitations on these violations is 5 years, which means anything you posted, anything you said, anything you did in the last half-decade can still be prosecuted. His brings us to the third trap, and it's one that's catching people who think they've done everything right. Your approved Form 1 or Form 4 must match the current physical description of your NFA item exactly. Any modification, any upgrade, any change that alters what's written on your approved form requires either a new registration or formal amendment. This is creating a compliance nightmare for anyone who's made even minor changes to their registered items over the years. Here's a common scenario. You registered an SBR 5 years ago with a 10.5-inch barrel and a specific handguard system. Over time, you've upgraded components. You swapped the handguard for a different brand. You changed the muzzle device. You put on a different stock. None of these modifications change the barrel length or the legal classification of the weapon. But now your physical firearm doesn't match the description on your approved form. According to current ATF interpretation, you are in possession of an unregistered NFA weapon, even though you registered it, even though you paid the $200 tax stamp, even though the fundamental specifications are identical. The ATF has started cross-referencing approved forms against photos and videos from social media, gun shows, and competitions. They're actively looking for discrepancies. Competitive shooters have been investigated because they posted match videos showing their registered SBR with different accessories than what appeared on their original Form 1. The configuration didn't change the legal status, but the description didn't match, and that's enough for a violation charge. Here's what makes this trap particularly insidious. Most people don't keep detailed copies of their original Form 1 or Form 4 submissions where they can easily reference them. They have the approval stamp, but they don't remember the exact wording they used to describe the item 5 or 10 years ago. If federal agents show up and your firearm doesn't match your original description, you have to prove what you submitted. If you can't produce that documentation, you're holding what the ATF will classify as an unregistered NFA item. The official guidance now states that any modification to a registered NFA item requires either filing a new Form 1 to re-register with updated specifications or submitting a formal written request to amend the existing registration. Both processes take months and require another $200 tax stamp. Estimates SUG. Over 60,000 NFA owners have modified their registered items over the years. The vast majority have no idea they're currently in violation. Let's talk about the fourth trap, because this one involves how the government is now monitoring and tracking NFA item movement in ways that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. The interstate travel requirement has always existed. Form 5320.20 has been mandatory for taking NFA items across state lines. But the enforcement has become aggressive, the penalties have escalated, and the tracking methods have become sophisticated. You're required to file Form 5320.20 before taking any NFA item to another state, listing your exact travel dates, specific destinations, and the purpose of transport. You cannot deviate from what you submitted. The form isn't general permission to travel, it's specific authorization for the exact trip you described. If your plans change, if you stay longer, if you go to a different location, each deviation is a separate federal violation. What's changed is how they're catching people. There are reports of increased roadside inspections in states with high concentrations of NFA owners, particularly near shooting ranges, hunting areas, and major gun shows. If you're found with an NFA item, and you don't have an approved Form 5320.20 that exactly matches your current situation, your items are subject to immediate seizure. There are documented cases of people being charged because their approved TR travel dates were off by just a few days when their trip ran longer than planned. The processing time for interstate travel forms varies wildly depending on the season. During hunting season, you're looking at 2 months or more. That means you need to plan any out-of-state trip with your NFA items months in advance and hope nothing about your plans changes. Because if something does change and you don't file new paperwork and wait for new approval, You're committing a federal crime the moment you cross state lines. This connects directly to the fifth trap, which is how your digital footprint has become the ATF's primary investigation tool. Every photo you post, every video you upload, every comment you make on forums or social media about your NFA items is permanent evidence that can be used against you. The ATF has dedicated resources to monitoring social media platforms, YouTube channels, Instagram accounts, gun forums, and even private Discord servers looking for compliance violations. They are specifically searching for photos that show your NFA items with accessories not listed on your approved forms, videos showing other people handling your suppressors or SBRs, posts with location tags that don't match your registered address, timestamps that indicate interstate travel without corresponding approved forms, comments where you casually mention storing items at secondary locations or lending them to friends. All of this is being cataloged, cross-referenced, and used to build D cases. Here's the critical point. Old posts still count. That photo you uploaded 3 years ago showing your suppressor with a different configuration, evidence of an unregistered modification. That video from 2 years ago where your buddy is shooting your SBR, evidence of illegal transfer. The statute of limitations is 5 years, which means everything you've posted in the last half-decade is discoverable and usable in prosecution. Even deleted content isn't safe. Investigators are using archived versions of websites, forum database backups, and third-party data recovery to retrieve posts that owners thought were gone. There are cases where people asked for advice in gun forums years ago, received incorrect information, followed that advice, and are now being charged based on their own posts admitting to violations. The sixth trap involves the people around you, and it's one most NFA owners never consider until it's too late. Anyone you've told about your items, your storage locations, your travel habits, or your modifications can become a witness or informant against you. And the ATF is actively recruiting tipsters through reward programs that pay between $2,500 and $25,000 for information leading to NFA violation convictions. Disgruntled ex-spouses are reporting former partners. Failed business associates are turning on each other. Even neighbors with grudges are making calls to ATF tip lines. The informant doesn't need proof. They need to make a credible allegation, and the ATF will investigate. By the time you know you're under scrutiny, they've already spent weeks or months building a case against you through surveillance, records checks, and social media monitoring. Divorce attorneys are now advising clients to report NFA violations as leverage in custody battles and asset disputes. The rewards have created a financial incentive for people to inform on gun owners they know, and the ATF has paid out hundreds of thousands of dollars in the last 2 years alone. Anyone who knows details about your NFA items, where you store them, how you use them, or where you've taken them, has information that could lead to your prosecution. Now we come to the seventh trap, and this is the one that affects the largest number of people while being the least understood. If you registered your NFA items through a gun trust, and you've made any changes to the trust beneficiaries, trustees, or responsible persons without notifying the ATF, you are currently in violation. And here's the devastating reality. Nearly 40% of all NFA trusts have outdated beneficiary information that no longer matches what's on file with the ATF. When you register NFA items through a trust, every responsible person must be listed and approved by the ATF. If you add someone to the trust, remove someone, or if someone dies, you must update the ATF registration using Form 5320.23. If the trust changes but the ATF registration doesn't, your trust is invalid. And if your trust is invalid, your NFA items are legally classified as unregistered. Think about what happens over time. People create gun trusts and list family members. Then they get divorced and remarried. Adult children move out. A CO trustee passes away. A listed beneficiary gets a felony conviction that makes them prohibited from possessing firearms. These life changes happen, and people update their trust documents with their attorneys, but they don't file the updated responsible person information with the ATF. The legal trust instrument changes, but the federal registration stays frozen in the past. Under current enforcement interpretation, if your active trust doesn't match what's registered with the ATF, all items in that trust are considered unregistered. Each unregistered NFA item carries a penalty of up to 10 years in federal prison and a $250,000 fine. If you have 5 suppressors and 2 SBRs in an invalid trust, that's 7 federal counts with 70 years of potential prison time attached. The ATF has begun cross-referencing. trust documents filed with state courts, probate records, and banking institutions against their NFA registration database. They're finding massive numbers of discrepancies. Over 800,000 NFA items are currently registered to trusts. Estate planning experts estimate that at least 300,000 of those trusts have documentation mismatches. That's 300,000. ND potential violations waiting to be discovered during audits that are already underway. The processing time for Form 53, 20.2, 3 to update responsible persons is currently 4 to 6 months. That means even if you file today to correct outdated information, you're technically in violation until the update is approved. But the consequences of not filing at all are catastrophic. If you inherited NFA items through a trust and the original trust creator has died, those items are in legal limbo until every new responsible person goes through the full ATF approval process with fingerprints, photographs, and background checks. These 7 traps aren't theoretical future problems. They're active enforcement priorities catching law-abiding gun owners every single day. The penalties are life-destroying: 10 years in federal prison per violation, $250,000 in fines per count, permanent loss of all gun rights, seizure of your entire firearms collection, not just the NFA items, a felony record that ends careers, destroys reputations, and eliminates future opportunities. Here's what you need to do immediately. First, verify that your NFA items are stored at the address listed on your registration. If they're not, file Form 5320.20 to change the location or move them back to the registered address. Second, review who has access to your items and ensure every person is properly documented on your registration or trust. Third, compare your current firearm configuration against your original approved forms and file amendments for anything that doesn't match exactly. Fourth, audit all your interstate travel over the last 5 years and determine if you have any violations that could surface. Fifth, go through your social media history and remove any content that shows your NFA items in ways that could demonstrate violations. Sixth, limit who knows about your items and never discuss storage, modifications, or travel in public forums or conversations. Seventh, if you have a gun trust, pull your original NFA registration documents and compare them to your current trust agreement to identify any mismatches. The compliance requirements are stricter than they've ever been. The enforcement is aggressive and well-funded. The investigation techniques are sophisticated and invasive. And the margin for error is exactly 0. You cannot afford to assume that what you've been doing is fine. You cannot rely on what someone told you at the range or what you read in a forum 5 years ago. You need to audit your own compliance based on current regulations and fix any problems before they're discovered. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications because regulatory interpretations are evolving constantly, and staying informed is the only way to stay compliant. Share this video with every NFA owner you know because this information could prevent someone from facing federal prosecution. Your freedom depends on understanding these traps and taking acti. On to protect yourself before it's too late. The game has changed, the rules are stricter, and what you don't know will absolutely be used against you.